My name is Josh Peck, host of Peck Report on Daily Renegade. I used to suffer with chronic pain from a degenerative bone disease. I was hopelessly addicted to opioids without any end in sight. But then, I discovered Kratom and CBD. I am no longer on prescription drugs, and I have more energy and pain relief than ever before. Kratom and CBD have given me my life back without draining my bank account. If you too would like some minor to major pain relief, Kratom and CBD might be for you. Either click on the links in the description below this video or go to dailyrenegade.com on the top left banner or right side ad and check out Tropic Health Kratom and CBD. Use promo code HEALTH20 for 20% off your order and get your life back today. A new Nazi Satanist group called the Order of Nine Angels has been labeled the most dangerous cult of our days today, and they are infiltrating some pretty. This thing's a lot more widespread than you might think. You might never have heard of this, but it's unfortunately gaining some ground. So we have to talk about that. Also, is the coronavirus about to herald the false Messiah? Leading rabbis are saying the coronavirus is about to bring about the pre-Messiah double Sabbath. And what does that have to do with their version of Messiah and our version of us being Christians, of our version of Antichrist? We're going to talk about all that and more on today's Peck Report. Hello and welcome to Peck Report. Hope you are all staying safe and healthy. And you know, I know a lot of news has been dominated by coronavirus stuff. It is important to talk about, especially since there are new developments to it every day. I'm even considering, and maybe by the time you watch this program, maybe I've already done it, but I'm considering doing a daily live cast from dailyrenegade.com. Because news is just going so fast, and it would be probably good if you guys had a source that you could trust. But I also don't want this to just be totally dominated by coronavirus stuff. We are going to talk a little bit about that in one of the segments, but the first one that I wanted to talk about comes from a story about a Nazi Satanist cult, and you may not have heard of this. I haven't heard of it either until just very recently, but it's gaining some ground. And what's really frightening too is even though they really have a lot of far left ideas, you know, and we'll get into why I say that, they're being labeled as far right, and you'll see why. And unfortunately, they share some of the same ideas that unfortunately we see in certain circles of Christianity. A lot of really anti-Jewish stuff. And I don't know why somebody would want to share an ideology with people like this, but of course, you know, most would say that they don't, but we're going to get into it, and we're going to see. Now, of course, because you always have to look at the bias of the source that you're reading from or watching, and most places are not going to be honest about their biases. I mean, I'll be honest about mine. I'm a Christian. I'm a conservative, so the reporting you're going to get from me is going to be filtered through that lens. But if we're being honest, all of us have a bias. All of us. So if you're listening to a source that says that it doesn't, they are lying to you right off the bat. Now, these groups, and there are a lot of groups like this, but a lot of them, they're labeled as far right, but they really don't have anything to do with the right or with conservatism or with any ideals that are more right, you know, politically. They really have nothing to do with us. You know, we on the right, on the actual right, you know, we conservatives, we tend to prefer smaller government, you know, limited government. almost as limited as possible, but true conservatives, we're not anarchists. We're not saying there should be no government. There is a role for government, clearly, and we're not strict libertarians either, because there's issues with that as well. But these groups, they tend to want, a lot of them are legitimately white supremacists, and I know that term gets thrown around a lot today, especially in the news. Everything is labeled white supremacy. Everything is labeled racist, so it's hard to know what is actually racist and what isn't. There's a lot of stuff labeled racist that isn't actually racist. But these specific groups, like the one we're going to talk about today, they do deal heavily in white supremacy, which is racist. Racism just means that it's the belief that one race is superior to another, or that all races are inferior to one other race. Doesn't matter the race. Could be white, could be black. You can have black supremacy, you can have white supremacy. Or any other supremacy. It's all racist. It's all bad. Any kind of racial supremacy is really evil. It's evil ideology. But a lot of these that we're going to talk about, like the one we're going to talk about today, the Order of Nine Angels, their particular brand of racism is white supremacist, and a lot of them want like a white ethno state. So that's not limited government. I mean, how do you achieve that? Through political processes. I mean, you need a very large government for something like that. That's not conservative. That's not on the right. That's actually more of a leftist idea. Leftists are the ones that want bigger government, and they want government to take control over the population. So them being labeled as far right is completely inaccurate. The way I would label far right, if there is a far right, I would say maybe it would be like the religious right, like the religious fundamentalists who put that into politics. That's probably as far right as you can get, while it's still being right, while it's still being on right of center. But because the left, they're actually the ones with the racist problem, and it's especially the anti-Semitism problem. They want to label these groups far right. And the only reason, the reason they do that is because they see conservatives, they see people on the right as racist, as white supremacists, and they see these groups as white supremacists, so they put two and two together and they say that they must be far right or alt-right or whatever. These people have nothing to do with the right, all right? They don't hold conservative ideas. Conservative ideals are that everybody's created equally. Many conservatives are religious, many conservatives are Christian, but even if they're not, they believe that every person is equal in value to every other person. That's why many people on the right are pro-life, because we believe that people, even unborn people in the womb, are still people, and they still hold equal value with the rest of us in terms of just being a human being. These people do not believe that. These people believe that there are gradations of value. Specifically, these people believe that white people are greater in value than other races, which is horribly wrong and evil. There's nothing right about that. There's nothing on the right about that. People who are conservative, or anybody who's actually holds conservative values, they don't believe that stuff. It's completely incompatible. So the source that we're going to look at, the news source that we're going to look at, because, of course, they have their own bias, they are going to label this far right. And so we have to kind of pick through here and find out what's truth and what isn't. So let's go through this together. This comes from New Statesman. And it says, a Nazi Satanist cult is fueling far-right groups overlooked by the UK authorities. So the group is called the Order of Nine Angels. Now, it's funny, they put it here, angles. I think that is wouldn't it be funny if it was actually angles? Is it angles? Let's find out, because they're saying angles, so maybe I mispronounced it, or maybe this publication misspelled it. Yeah, I don't know. Well, we'll find out. It's either angles or angels, but I would assume it would be angels. But Maybe it is angles. I don't know. Let's find out. But it says the Order of Nine Angles, which encourages extreme violence among followers, has infiltrated extreme circles in Britain. And that's another thing too. People on the right, people who are actually on the right, we typically don't like going the violence route to get things done. We like orderly protests, things like that. That's fine. We only resort to violence if we have to defend ourselves, but we typically we're not Antifa. And it's interesting too because the writer of this article, who is it? By Nick Lowles. So apparently Nick Lowles down here says, "I have been an anti-fascist campaigner." I don't know if this, because Antifa, that is short for anti-fascist. I don't know if Nick here is saying that he's part of Antifa or not. I don't know what he means by anti-fascist because, again, people on the left have called everything fascist, and when you call everything fascist, the word fascist loses all meaning. It would be like if you called every condiment in your fridge ketchup, even if it's mayonnaise, even if it's mustard, you just call it all ketchup. Well, then ketchup loses its meaning. You wouldn't know what the ketchup is. If you label everything as ketchup, you don't know what the actual ketchup is. So it's the same thing here. You label everything racist, you label everything fascist. Nobody knows what's actually racist and what's actually fascist. The word loses all meaning. So this person, Nick Lowles here says, "I have been an anti-fascist campaigner for over 30 years and thought I had seen it all. I fought against the National Front in the late 80s, Combat 18 in the 90s, the BNP in the noughties, and then the English Defense League, EDL, in the 2010s. But as we enter a new decade, the threat from the far right," again, as we will see, these people are not on the right, their ideology mirrors more extreme leftist ideology. The threat from the far right has become more dangerous than ever. Now, while this is all mislabeled and it's all mixed up and messed up and it's just a mess, we still do need to know about these groups, about these cults. We do need to know about them because, for one thing, we need to be vocal in explaining to people, even though they're not going to listen, but still we need to be vocal that we need to disavow these people. These people are not on the right. We need to disavow them. The people on the left, typically leftists, they don't disavow their own racists, their own bigots, their own bad guys. They don't disavow them, they embrace them. Typically on the right, you find more people that are willing to disavow the bad guys. So we need to continue in that, and we need to, be really adamant about the fact that these people are not on the right and that their ideology is closer to leftism than anything else. But again, typically people on the right, we think more in, terms of logic and fact and things like that, whereas people on the left typically go more with like emotion, feelings, and they don't mind. Many times they don't mind bending the truth or lying if the ends justify the means. Basically, typically people on the right, the ends do not justify the means. People on the left, the ends do justify the means. So. We have just different ways of viewing the world. And, I'm not a totally cold and logic person. I mean, I do put that, well, it depends on what we're talking about, but usually I put that first, especially in terms of policy and things like that. You got to put that first. But there is a place for emotion. There is a place for all of the creative, artistic stuff, the emotional stuff that comes from the left. But to me, with this kind of stuff, I see it more as like, salt on a steak. The steak is your logic, your truth. You need the truth. And the salt is like the emotion, how you feel about it, how you interpret it. It's kind of funny. Christina and I, my wife and I, were talking about this the other day. I was watching a really interesting show that was hosted by Ben Shapiro, and it was a Sunday special episode, and he was talking with I think he was the founder of Vox or something, Ezra Klein. And I suggest you all go watch that if you haven't. Go watch it, because it's really interesting to see how differently the right and the left view the world. And, when I was listening to that, it kind of came to me, and I told Christina, I think what the fundamental difference between the right and the left, between conservatives and liberals, or conservatives and leftists, the fundamental difference is how much, where our ratio of the importance of objective reality and subjective reality lies. So there's an objective reality, that's the physical world that you can measure, that you can test, that, things like facts that we should all be able to agree on, 2 + 2 = 4 kind of stuff. Then there's subjective reality, which is how it makes you feel, what it means, what's the interpretation of that. Okay, 2 + 2 = 4, but how do I feel about that? What does that mean? What does that what is that teaching us? That kind of stuff. That's subjective reality. And there is importance for both. We do need both, but I don't think it's equal. I don't think they're equally important. I think objective reality is far more important than subjective reality. It's far more important because objective reality is the thing that we can all hold on to. We should be able to. We can all grasp, we can all agree on, we can all hold on to. We should be able to anyway. What it means is something that we can debate, and we can have differences in opinion, and we can not all agree. So we should, when we make policies and things like that, we should base those policies on the facts, on the things that we can all agree on, or should be able to all agree on, the things that we can show and prove objectively. And then what it means or how it makes us feel, we can debate that later. But so that's typically people on the right. They put more importance on objective reality over subjective reality. And I don't know anybody on the right that would say that just you shouldn't have any subjective reality, like it should only be objective. I don't know any. I guess if you were going to have any kind of far right, it would be somebody like that who would say that we should only look at objective reality and we should totally ignore subjective reality. I've never heard of anybody like that. So I mean, if there was a far right, it would be that. But on the left, liberals tend to put more emphasis on what it means or how it makes somebody feel, regardless of the objective fact about a thing. And depending how far left you go, that is determined by how much more importance you put on the subjective stuff. Now, there are people, the leftists, the extreme leftists, who absolutely don't care about objective reality, and it's all subjective interpretation, 100%. You don't really see that on the other side. You don't see anybody that's 100% objective reality, but you do on the left. You do see people who's 100% subjective reality, and that gets dangerous. And that's why I say these groups, like the one that we're going to talk about, they are on the left, but because they're not dealing in objective reality. They're dealing in subjective, emotional reality, how they feel about certain races or about how things should go. They're not looking at anything objective. But in watching that Sunday special, that's what came to me. That is the difference between the right and the left. It's how much importance do you put on objective versus subjective reality. That's the difference between the right and the left. And people are different in those regards. So it doesn't mean that anybody who puts more importance on subjective reality is necessarily bad or evil. It's what they do with it. Because you can have evil people who pay more attention to objective reality. You can have evil people who look at the facts and then they still make terrible decisions. The decisions that people make go beyond their interpretation. So the decision is what somebody does, right? So I might have thoughts or feelings about something, but we don't act on them if they're wrong or if they're evil. And see, that's why you do need some subjective interpretation in there. It's like the salt on the steak. A steak is kind of boring without salt, but you wouldn't want it 50-50. You wouldn't want just as much salt on there as you have steak. That would be terrible. You need just enough to make it perfect. So it's the same thing here with there is a place for personal interpretation, debate, that kind of stuff. But But what we do with it, that's what really matters, what we do with it. And it seems that more and more the people on the more left somebody gets, the more erratic, the more aggressive, the more violent really they become. Now, they also project. That's another thing they'll do. So they'll say that people on the right become more violent, but that's really tough to prove because the only examples that they can bring up are these white supremacist people who are not a part of the right. And they have to mislabel these people as far right just so they can say that there are people on the right that become violent. Now, of course, anybody can become violent despite political party. Republicans and Democrats, we're all human, but typically you're going to see less violence in if you divide up human population based on what's more important, objective or subjective reality. You're going to find less violent people on the objective side. It can still happen. There's always going to be outliers, but and it's because violence is an action based on an emotion. Anger or hate or fear. Typically, if you almost have to train yourself to not be like that. You have to train yourself to put more importance on objective reality. That's why they say that old joke that if you're a liberal when you're young, you have no brain. Or what is it? Hang on. If you're a liberal when you're young, you have no brain, but if you're a conservative when you're old, you have no heart, or something like that. And it's not exactly true. There's varying gradations of that, but that's kind of where that old joke comes from. It's because it takes training. That's why typically older people are more conservative, younger people are more liberal. Because in order to see the world like that through an objective lens, it takes time, it takes training, it takes maturing, it takes a lot of maturity. And so that's why more often you see younger people tending towards liberalism and then in the extreme leftism. There's a difference between liberal and leftist. And even that, it depends on your gradation of how much importance you put on subjective reality. But it takes time and practice to get like that. That's why typically older people are conservative and younger people are not. Now we are seeing a surge in young conservatism in our generation, younger generations today, which is great to see, and so that's really cool. But typically, you're going to find it kind of parsed out that way. It's kind of like when you're a kid, all you want to eat is candy, and you grow up and you start liking vegetables more when you're older. It's sort of like that. So it takes time, it takes maturity. So and that's why these people that are called far right, that's why they can't be on the right. That it just doesn't match at all, because the violence is based on emotion. These people are putting more stock in emotion than they do in objective reality. If they were living more through an objective lens, they wouldn't hurt people because they don't agree with them. They would debate them respectfully, calmly, even if they have terrible ideas. They would debate other people, and they would try to convince other people through arguments, through reason, through logic. They would put more importance on that. But because they don't, and you're not going to see a whole lot of violence just from logic-based arguments. Because again, violence comes from emotion, not from you're not going to logic your way into violence. So that's kind of the split there. So these groups are being mislabeled. But that's what this article says. This article is calling them far right, and they're not. Okay, so let's get into this actual cult. As anti-extremism campaigners, we've been investigating the most extreme ideological group I've ever seen and have released our findings in our latest report. It's called the Order of Nine. Again, it says Angles. Order of Nine Angles. Maybe it's Angles because of like Anglo-Saxon or something. Seems like they should have went Order of Nine Angels. I mean, doesn't that sound kind of, I don't know, more powerful in some way? Angles? I don't know. But this could be a typo. So we'll find out. But It's a British neo-Nazi Satanist group that encourages extreme violence among its followers to destabilize society and overthrow what it sees as Jewish control of global culture and economics. Now, even in that reporting, when they say that, it encourages extreme violence, we have to be careful and actually check our sources. So why do they say that? And it goes to this, Telegram. Even here it says, or I guess it is angles, Order of 9 Angles. This is hopenot.hate.org.uk. Anti-Semitism and labor. I'm not sure, but far-right terror goes global. So it links to another probably leftist source. So you got to be careful with your sources, and you got to. There's a lot of times things are labeled as things that they're not. So do they encourage extreme violence? Possibly, but we got to really look into what this group actually says and what they do in order to properly know, because obviously a source like this has a bias and they're left leaning. But it's usually not a great sign when they cite another leftist source to bolster their point. But anyway, let's move on. But here's the line: overthrow what it sees as a Jewish control of global culture and economics. That thing, we're seeing that in Christian circles. There's a lot of anti-Jewish Christians that think that globalist Jewish people are running the world and they're trying to kill everybody and they're trying to force everybody into Noahide laws and stuff like that. And because of that, they start developing this disdain, this hatred for just Jewish people in general. And my question is, why is the Jewish part the focus? If that were true, if that whole scenario were true, does the Jewish part matter? I mean, they would just be evil people, right? Who cares if they're Jewish or English or Australian or African? Why does the race matter? And that's the big red flag to me. As soon as somebody, and they make that a big point, these people, it's always the Jews. What does the race matter? Why not just call them globalists or elitist? Who cares about their race? If this is happening, then they're evil. The race has nothing to do with it. But because they put the race in there, they're focused on it. So clearly there's some kind of bigotry going on, I mean, there would have to be to even include it. But we're unfortunately seeing this creeping into Christian circles, which, I mean, it blows my mind. And if you've ever tried to talk to these people, you can't get anywhere with them. There are some people that are just so filled with hate. They don't listen to anything that you say. They don't try to match your argument. And it's exactly like when you try to debate a leftist. It's exactly the same type of rhetoric and attitude that you get. But this is coming from so-called Christians. I mean, it's that same immaturity. And because I've tried to talk to these people, and that's you just can't get anywhere. I mean, you tell them things like, okay, because they'll say things like, well, Israel was just founded on a bunch of war and they took land that wasn't theirs. And what about the Palestinian? They took land that wasn't theirs. Okay, you could say that about America. See, now a leftist would say, yeah, America's bad too. But, so is Israel. But Christians who fall into this ideology for one reason or another, they don't really have an answer for that, because many of them are pro-America. Many of them are pro-America, but anti-Israel. And they actually think Zionists are evil people or something. Do you know what a Zionist is? According to just the standard definition, a Zionist is that you believe that Israel has a right to exist. That's it. That's what makes a Zionist. I'm a Zionist. If you believe that Israel has the right to exist, you're a Zionist too. Now that term has been dragged through the mud. That term, that word Zionism, has been made to mean a bunch of things that it doesn't mean. It's sort of like when people say Republican and then they think racist. Republican has been made to mean racist, even though it has nothing to do with it. It's the same thing. Zionism isn't pro-globalism, for example. It's not. There's nothing about Zionism, about just believing that Israel has a right to exist, that's pro-globalism. Just because there may be some Jews in high positions that are pushing for globalism, just because like I support Israel's right to exist, it doesn't mean that I would support those people, those Jews or whatever, pushing globalism. And they're not all Jewish, by the way. That's just like saying, birds fly, birds are bats, or bats are birds, whatever. It just doesn't, the logic doesn't follow. But again, these people are not operating in logic, so they're not going to pick up on that. They're in their emotional echo chamber with everybody else who feels this way, and they get each other all riled up. So that's like one thing. But you, like I said, like for one thing, the whole, Israel was founded on war and they took land that's not there. That is a severe reduction, if not just outright lie on history. But even if that were true, you could say the same thing about America and every other country in the world. All of them. But you could say that about America. So how can you be pro-America? America has a right to exist, doesn't it? But didn't we steal the land from the Native Americans? If so, then what are you doing here? Why are you still here if you believe that strongly in it? It's a double standard. And there isn't anything that these people will say about Israel, why they don't like Israel. They'll list off all the bad things that Israel does. You could say the same thing about America. All of them. They'll say, well, they promote the homosexual lifestyle and they have the biggest gay pride parades in the Gaza Strip or in Gaza or whatever, and they a lot of them will support abortion, and they do all these bad things, and all of them, America too. You could say the same thing about America. So what's with the double standard? Why don't you hate your own country then? Now leftists will at least admit that they hate their own country, but which is sick and demented. But Christians that try to adopt this anti-Jewish ideology, anti-Israel ideology, you can't be a supporter of America and not be a supporter of Israel, because for those reasons, it doesn't fit. You could say the same thing about us, unless you just want to be a total hypocrite. So why don't you hate America? Why don't you want to see America just go back to the Native Americans and we all have to leave? And that you don't really believe that should happen. Otherwise, you would be gone. You would feel a personal responsibility to leave, but you don't. You're still here. It's because there's obviously more to the story than that. There's obviously more going on than that. But why do we support America? It's not because of the bad things that we do. It's not because of the bad things that happen here. I hate abortion. I hate all that stuff, the pride stuff, but I don't hate the people. But we support America because of what it stands for. Those are bad things that happen in America, but America wasn't founded on those things. America, the way that America was founded, it doesn't stand for those things. And we know that our country could be better. So we love our country so much that we want to make it better. We want to work hard to fight against these evils, like child sex trafficking. We want to fight. That happens in America, happens in Israel too. It happens in every country. But we know our country can be better, so we want to fight against it. Same thing with people in Israel. They love Israel, but they know their country can be better, so they fight to improve it, right? So it's ridiculous to be anti-Israel and pro-America. It doesn't make any sense. And if you're anti-both, if you're anti-Israel and anti-America, you're just anti-country at that point. You're anti any country at all. You may as well be one of these open border lunatics that would get the whole world destroyed if they had 5 minutes of power. So the logic doesn't follow. So I would implore people who have fallen into this anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, anti-Zionism stuff, to look a little deeper into it and to study yourself, and really ask yourself, how is it that I can be pro-America but anti-Israel? And how is it not racist to be against the state of Israel? Like, that's the only home the Jewish people have. That's it. Where else are they going to go? And you might say, well, Palestinians, and there are other Muslim countries, a lot of them. This is the only place that the Jewish people have. That's it. And I know not all Palestinians are Muslim, but there are Palestinian Christians as well. But that's the thing with Israel is they can still live there. Like, they can still be, just like here in America. You can live in America if you're not from America. There are policies in place for that. But to say that one group of people, they got to get out, I mean, how is that not racist? I mean, what else is that based on? Their race, right? This group of people, they got to get out. What are you basing it on? What group? How are you grouping them? Based on their race. The Jewish people, right? So, I would ask, you would seriously have to ask yourself, how is this not racist? And you don't want to fall into racism. Anyway, and you don't want to share ideologies with these lunatics. So let's read some more. But anyway, so yeah, they see as the Jewish control of global cultures and economics. Oh, and then there's the other thing that the Jews aren't really the Jews. The Jews in Israel are not the real Jews because of this passage in Revelation. And that, to me, is the flimsiest, sorriest excuse I have ever heard to try to justify racism, to say that they're not really Jews because of one thing in Revelation, and that you don't even understand the context to. You don't understand what it's talking about. Those were letters written to, like, ancient churches in Turkey. Like, where in there? Show me where in that verse where it says, oh, and by the way, this is for 20th century Americans to understand, or 21st century Americans to understand about the Jews that will exist in 2,000 years. There's no reason to interpret it that way. And if you look at the actual context of the verse, you'll actually see, I mean, you can't really justify interpreting it that way. But again, a lot of people already have a bias, and then they want to find excuses, or they already have like a bias against somebody, or they already have this in them, and then they want to justify it in some way. It's just like slave owners, American slave owners. Some of them tried to use the Bible to justify it. And it's the same kind of flimsy arguments. It's the same kind of just sorry, sad, flimsy arguments that's totally twisting Scripture. And here we are still doing it today, but now we're doing it to justify our bigotry against Jewish people and our hatred of the state of Israel. And you can say, oh, I don't hate. Yeah. When you have this type of ideology, yeah, you do. Then you must not understand what hate is. Anyway. Continuing on, as the BBC reports, we are calling for it to be banned by the Home Office, and the Home Affairs Select Committee Chair Yvette Cooper MP has urged the Home Secretary to immediately refer to the government's proscription review group, commenting, quote, the evidence they have uncovered about the far-right terror group Order of Nine Angles is deeply disturbing, and the Home Security should immediately refer it to the government's prescription review group. The combination of Nazi Satanism, extreme violence, and sexual abuse makes it particularly troubling, and action needs to be taken to prevent them grooming and radicalizing other people. Now, I'll say this. I'm definitely a First Amendment guy. If they're committing crimes, then throw them in jail. If they're committing violence against people, throw them in jail. But I do not believe in silencing somebody just because they hold horrible views for fear that they're going to convince others. If they have horrible views, then their arguments will be horrible and they will convince nobody. And if you have better views, then your arguments are going to be better, and then people will listen to you. So I'm all about people being free to speak. Even disgusting groups like this, even anti-Israel, anti-Jewish people, they're free to say whatever they want to say, but we don't have to listen. We're not required to listen. So we just need to come up with better arguments, and they set the bar pretty low, so it's easy to do. Now, but again, if everything that they're saying is true about the extreme violence, sexual abuse, that kind of stuff, then there are already laws in place for that. So just enforce the laws that are on the books already. I don't know why we need all these committees and all these like extra effort. There's already laws in place against this stuff. That should be enough, right? Arrest them, throw them in jail, prosecute them, throw the book at them. Okay, it says the Jewish labor movement and multiple MPs, including Shadow Cabinet Officer Minister Stephanie Peacock and Shadow Policing Minister Louise Hay, have also called on the group to be outlawed. Now, what does it mean to outlaw a group? What would that mean? I mean, is it taking again, if there's violence, if they're enacting violence on people, then what that is, it's individuals committing violent acts against other individuals, and there are laws for that. Place those individuals in jail. You don't have to outlaw a group. I mean, what does that even mean, to outlaw a group? Does that mean that those people, like, if they're found to be a part of that group, they're prosecuted? I don't understand what outlawing a group means. But I don't like the connotation that's involved. Because look, if they can outlaw one group, they can outlaw another. They can outlaw Christianity. If they're allowed to outlaw, now again, like I said, I'm not saying that they shouldn't prosecute these people. They absolutely should. But how is outlawing a group different than what's the difference between arresting the individuals who are committing the violent acts and outlawing a group? Like, what is the difference there? We already have laws in place. Why do we need extra measures just to enforce the laws that we have? So it says, although we are seeing a period of decline in the traditional organized far right in this country, globally the far right is on the ascendancy. Across Europe, far right political parties have made headway, and even so far as into government. No clue what any of that means because, again, they call everything far right. So far right has lost all meaning. Violent groups like C-18 have been banned in several countries. And as the children born in the digital era hit adulthood, the world of far-right activism has splintered into many different scenes, from the alt-right to the misogynistic manosphere to anti-Semitic conspiracy circles. The way to end a cult or the way to end a group, it's not to outlaw the group itself or to ban the group itself. It's to take away the incentive. It's to take away. All you got to do is just have better arguments. If someone wants to join a group, talk them out of it. Have a better argument. Say, well, here's why everything this group stands for is wrong. Then that person doesn't want to be part of that group, and you do that enough times, the group is dissolved and it just dies on its own. If you outlaw something, that group is going to feel persecuted, and it's going to grow underground. It's going to have a massive root system. So you can't ignore it. But to just outlaw and ban a group like that, again, outlaw the individuals who are committing violent acts, enforce the laws that are already on the books and leave it at that. That should be enough. If everybody who's committing violent actions is in jail, then there's nobody left to commit violent actions, right? That plus convincing other people to not join, that's the end of the group. To try to do a ban or to try to do an outlaw thing on a specific group, you know how groups are, especially cults. They're just going to feel persecuted, and they're going to grow larger in numbers, and they're going to do it underground. That's all that's going to happen. As the battle shifted online, explicit white supremacist ideology has been subsumed by a wider but more nebulous war over identity and culture. As a result, the boundaries between far-right ideas and the mainstream debate have become increasingly blurred. No, not really. The people who write articles like this are the ones who are blurring those lines. The lines are pretty distinct. People who have these type of violent ideologies, they are on the left. People who don't are on the right. What conservative point of ideology, what conservative belief is violent in nature? They're all basically logic based. The only violence you're going to find is self-defense kind of stuff, or like just war, something like that. But even that conservatives, disagree in. But it has nothing to do with personal one-on-one, violent actions. Yet at the same time as the digital sphere has replaced an older threat, has created a new one, extreme far-right terror. Across the world, far-right terror has surged from Hanau to LA to Christchurch as a digital culture of peer-to-peer radicalization has created a self-directed international community dedicated to the planning, preparing, and promoting of white supremacist-inspired murder. And again, okay, so yeah, that Christchurch thing. If you actually look at that case and read, I'm not familiar with these other two, but when you look at that case and read what he wrote, he was not on the right. He wasn't a conservative. I think he even said that he like hated Trump or something like that. But so O9A is the most extreme Satanist group in the world, so much so that some of the material put out by the group is so disturbing it is held in a secure section at the British Library and can only be accessed under supervision. It encourages followers to engage in forbidden and illegal acts of extreme violence. All right, again, that's a crime. If it's inciting violence, if somebody is going out of their way to try to get somebody to commit violence, that's inciting violence. That's already a crime. That's already a crime on the books. Now, again, this is happening in Britain, and I don't know how different their laws are from ours, so maybe it's different. But here in America, there's already laws. The founder of the movement, David Myatt, has been explicit in his nihilistic aims. Well, see, there you go. Typically, people on the right are not nihilistic. That kind of goes against everything that people on the right believe in. You know, human value. If you're nihilistic, you don't believe in human value at all. You believe everything's pointless. There's no meaning to anything. People on the right, even non-religious people on the right, they believe in human value, human worth, and that we all have equal claim to that worth. These aren't far right. Like nihilism is more of a leftist ideology. That's more of an atheistic, Darwinian evolution, leftist, a combination of those three. Not saying that everybody who holds one of those views is all three, but just a combination of those three. That's nihilism. Just the idea that there's no God, there's no creator, nothing means anything, everything's meaningless. We're all gonna die someday, so it doesn't matter. Nobody has any value. That's nihilism. There's nothing in conservatism that gets anywhere close to that. You know, the whole point of conservatism is that we have value and there is meaning to life. Some conservatives point to God and you know take it that far, and I'm one of those. I take it that far. Not all conservatives do, but if you're a conservative, then you believe that there is a meaning, there is value. So you can't really call somebody far right if they're nihilistic. Anyway, David Myatt saying that he has tried to, quote, create some things which can disrupt our societies and which can lead to the creation of strong, really dangerous, ruthless individuals, end quote. I would have to look at the context of that quote to really know what it means. Because what does he mean by, we hear dangerous and we think violent, but is that what he meant? I would have to hear the context, and the context is not offered here. Where did he say that? Okay, so in his Terrorist Handbook, A Practical Guide to the Strategy and Tactics of Revolution, he clearly states that, quote, the whole fabric of this decadent materialistic society must be broken down and destroyed by whatever means are necessary and practical, and however ruthless we have to be, for such ruthlessness is now necessary to save our people and our land. Okay, now, again, I haven't read that, so I don't know the context, but usually by whatever means necessary, that usually means by whatever means necessary, which would include violence. Again, I would have to see the context. For all I know, he could have wrote before that. The context could have been like in terms of a debate. Probably not what he meant at all. But that's why it's important to really look at the context instead of just taking a quote like that and just thinking that we can know immediately what was in his head when he wrote it. So we would need more context there. O9A's philosophy of ultimate transgression and depravity explicitly aims to foster such a culture among certain sections of the far right. We have found from our research that it operates by not just disseminating its propaganda, but by seeking to infiltrate other extreme groups and covertly spreading its philosophy. Encrypted digital platforms such as messaging service Telegram are where O9A material is shared. Our research found Several Telegram channels dedicated to O9A on which propaganda text and music are shared. One of the largest channels is called Rapewaffen, which states its official beliefs are O9A Satanism and esoteric rapistism. Now, that sounds very extreme and pretty good indicator that these guys are no good. But the whole context thing is important because if a leftist were to watch this, they would have a very easy time and feel totally justified in labeling me as defending this group, which obviously I'm not. But by me saying things like you got to look at the context, I don't know if this is what he meant. I would have to look into it more to really know. That alone is enough for some leftists to say that I am supporting and defending this group. So this is how these people think. And this is why I don't trust them to tell me what somebody else means. I don't trust whoever wrote this article, Nick something. I don't trust Nick to, I don't trust his judgment to tell me the intentions of this group. That's why I said I would have to look into it myself. Which of course will happen, and that's the whole point of this too. Is it should be good instruction for all of us that we can't just blindly trust what we read in an article, and that's again you find a lot of this in the Jewish conspiracy circles. They just trust what they read in somebody's blog. You know, they don't have actual objective reasoning. They don't have any context of anything concrete to believe that. They already believe it, and then they find excuses to keep it going, to justify it. So I don't trust this article to tell me the intentions of this group. I would want to investigate the group myself, and we should all have that in mind. We should all have that attitude with any group or any idea or any theory or any belief. We should all we don't have an excuse anymore. We all have to be researchers, and I know we're gonna. I think that's about all. There's more to the story, but you can go to newstatesman.com to find out more if you want. But I know that it's kind of been it's almost a cliche at this point, but you know, a lot of researchers, especially if they're Christian, a lot of them will say things like, "Look, I'm not saying everybody has to be a researcher." All right, I am saying that. I am saying that you have to be a researcher. I mean, if you're going to hold a strong opinion about something that you're going to share on social media, you know, when it has to do with like people groups or religion or something that can seriously affect somebody else, and you're trying to convince people that you're right, yeah, you got to be a researcher. Why else do you have that opinion? Why if you have an opinion that's that strong that you're going to defend that strongly when somebody disagrees with you, why do you have that opinion if you're not a researcher? You do have to be a researcher if you're going to have an opinion like that. Otherwise, then you just shouldn't have an opinion, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with you don't have to have an opinion on everything. I don't know where our culture got this from, where you know, we feel like we have to have an opinion on everything. There's so many things I don't have opinions about. Like, I don't have a preference of one football team over another because I don't know anything about football. I wasn't brought up with it. I don't watch it. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but it's not an interest of mine. You know, I have no opinion about it. So when somebody asks me like, who do I want to win the Super Bowl? My answer is, I don't know who's playing. I guess whichever animal mascot is the biggest. You know, I don't have any opinion about it. You know, there's lots of things I don't know about, so I just don't have opinions about them, and I'm totally fine with that. And you should be too. If there's something that you don't know enough about, or you don't know it well enough that you don't know all of the sides of the argument, you don't know what the opposition to that argument, to that opinion is. You know, I mean, if you know a subject really well, you should know, or if it's like an idea or something, you should know what the opposition is to it. And you should be able to understand that too, because it has to do with the subject. So if you're an anti-Israel guy, you either just should not have that opinion, or you should be so well versed on that subject that you should know my own position better than I know it myself. Like that's how well you should know your own subject. And that's why I say, you know, when I talk to these people, I know their position better than they know it. And because I know that, I know how to argue against it. And then they don't have an answer for it because there is no logical answer for it. But when I face them with that, they typically kind of go into a little online rage, or they'll call me names or something like that, or they'll say some slur or insult, or they go that route. They don't argue it with actual logic or facts because they haven't thought about it long enough. They only believe it because they read something somewhere or they saw some video somewhere and it was appealing to them and they just ran with it. So that has caused so much destruction in the church because there are a lot of anti-Israel, anti-Jewish Christians out there. It's caused so much destruction, and it's just from people being uninformed and just sharing this stuff around and basically bullying other people into it. And I know because I see how these people argue. They many of them have tried to bully me into that view too, called me all sorts of names because I didn't believe in their ridiculous ideology. And I don't care what names they call me. I'm not going to be anti-Israel, but not everybody stands up to it. Some people, they allow it to convince them, and it's caused a lot of destruction. So if you don't know about a topic, if you just read some blog somewhere, maybe just don't talk about it. Research it further. Research the opposite argument. Research the pro-Israel stuff. If you're going to try to convince me that pro-Israel Zionism stuff is wrong, then you should know that subject better than I do. You should at least be confident that you do. But I've never heard a convincing argument. And again, I'm based in logic and reason. Little bit of emotion, but mostly logic and reason. I've never heard a convincing argument that would come close to convincing me that I should not be a Zionist and that I should be suspicious of the Jewish people. I'm certainly suspicious of globalists. I definitely think globalism is a terrible ideology. But that has nothing to do with Jewish people to me. I don't care if they're Jewish or black or white, or I don't care what race they are. If they're globalists, then and I don't even care about the people themselves necessarily. I care more about arguing against the ideology of globalism. It doesn't matter to me who holds that position and who doesn't. Why should that matter? What matters to me is what is the argument for it, what's the argument against it, and which is the better argument. That's what matters, the idea itself, not the person. So I've never heard a convincing argument that would convince me to not be Zionist. All right, we're going to get into, we got to talk about one more thing about this coronavirus and a false messiah, speaking more about Israel and Jewish stuff, that which actually has something to do with Jewish people because it's their, this is from Orthodox Jewish people, so it's their religion. But I want to talk a little bit about what they're saying about the coronavirus and how they're saying that this is like a precursor to their Messiah or something, and how their Messiah could very well be our Antichrist. And I don't hate Jewish people for that. They're deceived just like you were and I was before we were saved. They're deceived. They're prisoners in a war, all right? So we need to pray for them. We need to spread the gospel, and that is why we support ministries who do just that. So when you buy a membership to Daily Renegade, if you want to see the rest of this Peck Report, you need to get a membership, dailyrenegade.com. And when you get a membership to Daily Renegade, you're not only supporting our ministry. We're not a stagnant pond where everything you put into it just stays with us. We're a flowing stream. So we support other ministries. We support two ministries that minister to Jewish people because they need the gospel, just like all of us needed it. If you're saved, you needed it at one point. If you're not saved, you still need it. They need the gospel too, and I think that that's the best solution to get this stuff turned around, to get people saved and actually teach them what true love really is. The love of Jesus Christ. So we support. We also support a children's hospital, and we support a pro-life ministry. And if you want more information on those, you can go to dailyrenegade.com. But 20% of your membership fee goes goes to those efforts. So go to dailyrenegade.com. You can get a membership. You can watch the rest of this Peck report. It would be a good thing to do that now, because right now it is only $10 a month or $100 a year. If you get the $100 a year, that's the better deal. You get 2 months for free, and you don't have to think about it again until Trump is reelected, till well after. So you'll want to do that. And also, get it now while it's cheap. We might have to increase prices. So the price will not increase for existing members. But if you wait to get a membership, if you're on the fence about it and you wait, and then if you decide to do it later, you might have to pay a higher fee, or a higher membership rate. And I explained in a different video why we might have to do that. A good thing that will keep us from having to do that is sharing our videos. We lost a lot of traffic when YouTube banned us, a lot. So you can help us by sharing our videos around, and let's get some of that traffic back. Then we don't have to increase our prices, and that would be awesome. I don't want to increase our prices if we don't have to. But you'll get the rest of this Peck report. You'll get the rest of every show we have at dailyrenegade.com. We have about 15 unique shows, and we're constantly adding more. We're trying to be the Netflix of fringe Christianity. So don't give your money to Netflix. Cancel your Netflix subscription. Ditch the flicks. Come over to Daily Renegade, because Netflix has made it clear they hate Christians. They absolutely do. They put so much anti-Christian propaganda on their platform. And we don't hate you. So if you're going to spend your money anyway, spend it with us and help us build a thriving ministry here that can hopefully help in the effort to make disciples of all nations and get our culture turned around back towards Christ. That's what we would love to see. Also, while you're there, that is, again, dailyrenegade.com. While you're there, we have several items that you should stock up on, and we have gotten banned on YouTube for telling you about these items because they're so important, but they act like they're dangerous or something, and they're not. But if you are a chronic pain sufferer and you rely on Kratom the way I do, I have a rare bone disease. I take Kratom every day just to get through the day, and it works great. Most of the time, I don't even have to think about my chronic pain, which is just such a blessing. Get some Kratom, and if you rely on Kratom to get you through the day like I do, you're going to want to stock up on this now, because the second the government has the power to do it, the second they have an excuse, and they have the excuse with coronavirus, the second they have the excuse, they're going to ban Kratom. They've been trying to do it for years, I think they're finally going to do it. So, and also just people are buying a lot of it because the coronavirus stuff, it's going to increasingly become hard to get. So, stock up now while you can. Kratom stays good for a really long time, so you can buy I am still taking Kratom that I bought. What was it? 3 years ago, I think. It was when the FDA first tried to ban Kratom, and I thought they were going to succeed, so I bought a lot of it. And I'm still taking that Kratom today. It works great. Just keep it in a cool, dry place. I keep it in a cupboard in our kitchen, and it just cool, dark, dry place, and it'll stay good for a really long time. So stock up now. Get a lot of this stuff, because it might not always be available. While you're at it, do the same thing with CBD. CBD Pure is the most pure and powerful, beneficial CBD available. They test every single batch. They test through a third-party testing facility to make sure that you are getting the purest, most organic, pesticide-free CBD on the market today. So you'll want to check that out. You can get that at Daily Renegade. And then the one that really upset YouTube, and which is the reason that we're not on our main channel right now, colloidal silver. A lot of people have had a lot of great things to say. If you're going to get colloidal silver, I suggest Silver of Life. It is the #1 rated pure colloidal silver, and it will not cure your coronavirus. So there's just some people making some ridiculous claims. And I would never go that far. Actually, I've been telling people you can use this stuff to clean your kitchen counters with instead of using harmful chemicals that you keep in your sink, right above where you drink your water, these cancer-causing chemicals. Instead of using that, get some colloidal silver. But there have been people that say this will help boost immune systems and stuff like that. So a lot of people like it. A lot of this audience likes it. So that's why we make it available. And because we want to do right by you, so we did look for what we believe is the best the best purest colloidal silver out there, and we came across Silver of Life. And so we really like them. So if you're going to get it, you should go to dailyrenegade.com. You can find all those links in the right at the top of the website. We make it super easy. Also, at the beginning of this episode, you probably saw a commercial for Tropic Health Kratom. They're great too. So Coastline Kratom and Tropic Health Kratom are both amazing. The reason we gave you two is in case one runs out of stock, or just in case your body responds better to one supplier over another. You know, everybody's different. It just gives you a choice. Also, Tropic Health accepts credit cards, while Coastline Kratom accepts Zelle Pay. If you don't have a Zelle Pay account, it's really easy. You can do one on their website. They make it easy for you, so it's not a big deal. But that's why we give you both options. All right, so let's see, members only. Hang on the line. Everybody else, thank you so much for joining us. Until next time, take care and God bless.